Zoom करेगा पूरा सारा दिन approach अपन को लगे कब वीडियो में देखिए सर्वर टेंडर के लिए अब बनाने के लिए स्टार्ट हो
Good morning, everybody. Today is Sunday. It's a holiday, and आप लोग, I think you are just enjoying your time. So I don't want to that is waste the time. I just within the limited time, आप लोग को कुछ सिखाना चाहता हूँ. क्योंकि actually what happens in Sunday you have to spare some time for some other areas. It is marketing, all these things. But anyway, आप लोगों का टाइम दैट इज व्हाट यूटिलाइज करने के लिए मैं आया हूं. सो सेम कल मैं पढ़ा था अप टू इंस्टांस ऑफ व्हाट इज द जॉब ऑफ इंस्टांस ऑफ मैंने बताया था. लेकिन आज मैं एंटर कर रहा हूं पॉलीमॉर्फिज्म. यू नो दैट अ पॉलीमॉर्फिज्म इज वन ऑफ द पावरफुल फीचर ऑफ ऑब्जेक्ट ओरिएंटेड कांसेप्ट. And everybody knows that polymorphism is a powerful feature of object-oriented concept. Polymorphism is built by two Latin words. One is poly, means many, morphe means form. Polymorphy. So when a object plays different role in different situation, it's called as polymorphic behavior of the object. So till the time I'm just spending the time with you. Now it is a Sunday, but you guys just listen my words. After the time is over, you move towards marketing areas. आप लोग marketing चले जाओगे. तो ये सब चीज जो होता है ना, this is the polymorphic behavior of the object. अगर एक object के पास polymorphic behavior नहीं है, that object is a abnormal object. Abnormal object having no polymorphic behavior. So till the time Sunday है मैं आपके साथ शेयर कर रहा हूँ कुछ moments. After the moment is over, I spend time with my family because it is Sunday. So this is my polymorphic behavior. If I'm not spending the time with my parents or with my relatives or with my family, then I'm just wasting the time. So anyway, polymorphism is of two types. One is compile time polymorphism, another one is runtime polymorphism. I think in the last class you asked me the question that why it is called as runtime polymorphism. I think one question I faced in the last that is what last session. The session tells that in the session you asked me the question, sir, why overriding is called as runtime polymorphism. Today I must elaborate. But there are lots of features of overriding is there. I must elaborate one by one so you feel comfortable. Because nowadays lots of questions you face in case of method overriding. Method overriding supports what? Runtime polymorphism. Listen my words. What it tells, when a method is override in the child class, then it supports runtime polymorphism. What actually runtime polymorphism is, I must elaborate. But you see, what is method overriding? That is the main part that I want to explain. Method overriding hota kya hai? Why, as a developer, we are always using word method overriding? That is the powerful feature. So simple. The base class method is override in the child class. Remember, without inheritance, overriding never possible. Remember, without inheritance, overriding is not possible. So for overriding, you have to use inheritance. Next, final method of the base class cannot be override. Static method of the base class cannot be override. If the base class method is private, that cannot be override. Remember these three constraints. Which method of the base class cannot be override? First, when the base class method is final, that method cannot be override. When the base class method is static, that cannot be override. When the base class method is private, that cannot be override. Clear? So this is not possible. Sorry, students. Hello. Now audible. Hello. Audible. Hello. Is it audible? Please give me the comment. There are some technical problems are there. It tells that that is the method is only override in the child class. Now audible, please give me the comments, please. Is it audible? I think yes. Okay, fine. So what it tells, overriding is only possible in the child class, and when the base class method is static, it cannot be override. When the base class method is private, that cannot be override. When the base class method is final, that cannot be override. These are the constraints in Java. You try to remember these are the restrictions. But why I override a method? What is overriding? Method name same, return type same, and parameter same. In simple word, the total signature of the method is same. And remember, method overriding is only possible in child class. We can't override the method in the same class because there is a duplicate method. I can't do that. It is without inheritance, I can't do it. So anyway, overriding case, the biggest advantage is what I redefine the base class method in the child class means as per my requirement, I can modify the property in the child class. Take an example. My father is a doctor. I don't want to accept the same profession. I have the same talents, whatever the talents is with my father, the same talents is with me. Or whatever the talents is with my mother, the same talents with me. But I redefine the method in the child class because I don't want to enter into that is a doctor profession. My talents I can implement in some other areas. Now come to the point. Take an example. I introduce a new product for that is what or Apple introduce a new version in that is this year. Next year, the security policies or something. Take an example: the camera quality must be modified, and if it is not override, how the feature is modified in the next version. Otherwise, it is not possible. So anyway, the question you asked me that overriding biggest advantage is what it supports runtime polymorphism. This is the biggest advantage. But how it supports runtime polymorphism, today I explain. Check here how it supports the runtime polymorphism. Now check here, I just show you a simple example, then you understand how it supports runtime polymorphism. Now I just move here, that is a demo dot. See here, what I can do here, that is a class A. A is a class. I have an instance variable that is called a data. You know that instance variable means what? Object variable. And you know that the size of the object depends on instance variable available in the class. In this class, there is only one instance variable is available. What is that? That is data. Now, what I can do here, I have a constructor that is a non-parameterized constructor. It called the increment method. It called. Yeah, you see, it called the increment method. Now, what is my next job? Yeah, you see, public void increment. Now, check here, a simple example I show you. Now, by showing this example, you can justify that, sir, this is called as runtime polymorphism. Inside the increment method, I just increment the data value only once. Now, A is a class having an instance variable and data. It has a constructor. Inside the constructor, I call the increment method. Yes, increment method is defined where data is increased only once. Now, I just write here class B extends the A. You try to understand. Method overriding is only possible in case of inheritance. Without inheritance, method overriding never be possible. Now, B has another constructor. It also called the increment method. Now, you see, this is called an increment method. I just write at the rate override. Listen, nowadays we are using annotation. What is the job of the annotation? This is called an annotation. And what is the job of the annotation? Annotation gives the instruction to the compiler that the base class method override in the child class. If I am unable to override the base class method in the child class, then it generates error. It gives some instruction just you see, I just write here public void increment. Check here. Now here what I did, I just write here data plus equal 10. In the override method, in the base class method, data increase how many times? Only once. But in the override method, data increase how many times? That is 10 times. See, what actually happens here, B is the child class of A, where I override the method. Now you see, this is called as override. Name same, return type same. There is no parameter in the base class is available in the child class also. There is no parameters. I move to the next class, public class, what the class name is the data is it. What I did here, that is public void static void the name. Dot you see that is string data. Just enter into the name. Now you see db is equal to new. Now listen my words. What I did the db dot increment I call. Now after that, what I did the system data out println. I want to print the value of job. You see, data value is what I did the db dot. Is it over? That is the end of this block. Now you see how the execution proceed. Then you understand. Now here you see db is the reference of which class? B class. But what I did here, I am constructing the child class object by calling the child class constructor. When I call the child class constructor, here you see it is entered into the child class constructor. Now listen my word. What is called as runtime polymorphism or lead binding? First you understand. Here what happens when I call the increment method, compiler face problem. In Java case, compiler bind the method. If I call a method, compiler bind it. And then JVM decide whom the compiler bind, JVM call that method. But in case of method overriding, as the total signature of the base class method is same in the child class, compiler unable to bind the method. Here the problem is total signature of the base class method is similar to the child class method. So compiler not bind it. Who bind the method? JVM. JVM bind the method after I construct the object of the child class. Whose object I construct, that class method is called. That is called as later binding. Because in case of Java, object always constructed at the runtime. Now here you tell which class object I create, child class. So when I call the child class constructor, JVM, that is what JVM decide which method to be mined, not compiler decide. When I call the constructor execution move here, before you know the rule of inheritance, every child class constructor must implicitly call base class which constructor, non-parameterized. When it enter into base class non-parameterized constructor, it call the increment method. The base class constructor call the increment method. Listen, Most of the guys tell that as it called the increment method, compiler gives the priority to the base class method because it is the constructor of the base class. No, it is not the constructor of the base class, but it is the constructor of that is what base class, but it called the child class increment method. Why? Because method is not bind at the compile time, method is bind at the runtime. After the child class object is constructed, here who bind the method? Is the compiler bind or JVM bind? JVM bind. When the JVM bind the method, even if it is the constructor of base class, it called the child class method. When it called the child class method, data value is 0. 0 plus 10 is 10. This is called this is a good example. You saw them. Sir, it is the constructor of the child class. If compiler bind, then obviously it give bind toward a base class method. Priority give to the same class member. But as the method is bind by JVM, after the child class object is constructed, JVM bind the child class method. When JVM bind the child class method, 0 plus 10 is 10. After the constructor of the base class job is over, it will back to the child class constructor. Now, same way, when it called the increment method, child class constructor also called the increment method. Now, it also called the increment method of the child class because I'm creating the child class object every time JVM bind the method. Now, 10 plus 10 is 20. After the execution job is over, it will back to the second line. See here, when it call bb.increment, check here. It another time bb points to the child class object. So JVM bind the child class method. Another time it call the child class increment method. That is what 20 plus 10 is 30. Now system output and db.data. Now what the data value is? Data value is 30. So simple way I just show you how it is possible in case of Java that as a developer I am constructing the that is what child class object. So 3 times the increment method is called. One time it is called by the base class constructor. One time it is called by the child class constructor. One time it is called by me. But all 3 times, as I am constructing the child class object, JVM bind child class method. As JVM bind the method, it is called as what? Yearly binding or late binding? Late. If compiler bind, that is yearly. If JVM bind, that is called as late binding. Or it is called as runtime polymorphism because object always constructed at the runtime. So I think someone asked me the question in my last class that, sir, please justify how method overriding is the good example of runtime polymorphism. I explained that your compiler not bind the method, but your JVM bind the method. When JVM bind the method, after the object of the child class is constructed, it is called as late binding. And try to understand, it is also called as runtime polymorphism because object is always constructed at the runtime. Everyone clear? Output must be 30. See here, I just show you. This is a good example. If in the interview, this is a genuine question. Someone asks you the question, please show them this example and justify that, sir, output is this. Check here, what the output is 30. So listen, so whatever I told you, that is the genuine part in Java. And see, this type of question they will ask you. Now, clear? So fine. Just I know that today is your day because it is Sunday. You guys, I know that you have lots of that is what tasks are there. Marketing is there. Lots of tasks are there because one day is only a holiday for you guys. But thank you guys for interacting with us, connecting with us. I'm also spending. I have lots of job also, but I want to give it to you guys on online because live classes I want to give you for an interview. So you don't feel when you are facing an interview, you don't feel that you don't know anything. Just listening my word, you can face the interview also because that is the interview related question. And as a student, you grab the concept. So जो लोग भी सुन रहे हैं, that is what listening. तो सुनने के बाद थोड़ा सा इम्प्लीमेंट करते हैं. तो एक्चुअली क्या होता है ना, अगर आप इम्प्लीमेंट ज्यादा करोगे तो ये सब चीज ना पूरा दिमाग में रह जाएगा. तो हम लोग जब पढ़ रहे थे ना, हम लोग इतना प्रैक्टिकल नहीं जानते थे, बट हम लोग जब इंटरव्यू फेस कर रहे थे, हम लोग देख रहे थे कि नहीं यार, क्वेश्चन तो ज्यादा, दैट इज व्हाट प्रोग्रामिंग पार्ट से पूछते हैं. ये सब चीज थ्योरी में सब, अगर मैं आप लोगों को ना एक्सप्लेन कर दूंगा थ्योरी में, तो आप लोग समझ नहीं पाओगे. Theoretical part, if I explain everything on theory, that you grab it for a smaller period of time. But I want that you grab it for a longer period of time. Whatever the language is, but you know that object-oriented concept till the time captures the market. Every concept, every nowadays, Oracle is a database, supports Word. That is same object-oriented concept. You know that Python also use the same concept. You tell that no, Python is easier. How it is easier? That is also, it supports this technique because it also supports the object-oriented concept. C++ supports object-oriented concept. This type of question they ask you. Overriding is also available there. So if you learn a object-oriented concept thoroughly, job is not a matter for you guys. Whatever the language you know, that's not a matter. आप लोग बोल रहे हो कि मैं बहुत बार देखा है, बहुत स्टूडेंट आके बोल रहे हैं, सर आई वांट टू लर्न ए लैंग्वेज पर्टिकुलरली फॉर मशीन लर्निंग लाइक पाइथन. आई वांट टू लर्न फॉर मशीन लर्निंग. पाइथन इज अ गुड लैंग्वेज. I I know that it is a good language, but that is what Java में भी हो सकता है, because Java is a language. I want to communicate with you by the help of English. I also communicate with you by the help of Hindi. That's not a matter. It's a channel only, nothing else. Language is a channel. So आप लोग दिमाग में डालो कि जावा में भी कोई सब चीज हो सकता है. जो चीज that is what पाइथन में हो सकता है, वो चीज जावा में हो सकता है. जो चीज जावा में हो सकता है, वो चीज पाइथन में भी हो सकता है. But you must be strong in a language. So anyway, I'm just explaining today that is the method override. Now fine. So आप लोग का that is what any doubt, please ask me. If you have any doubt, please ask me or give me your comments. Now you grab it or not, please share your comments, then I can proceed to the next part. Are you enjoying this topic? Can I proceed? Thank you. Now I move to the next part. Next part is sometimes I saw that they ask you the question in interview that overriding case return type same hota hai na different hota hai. That is the thing. I saw that in our book also it is specified that return type must be same, must be same. But Java एक feature introduce किया. वो feature का नाम है covariant return type. Why I explain this thing? Because I saw that in the traditional version, whenever I also teach Java, I teach my student that students in case of method overriding return type must be same. But nowadays we are facing problem. We never tell that return type must be same. We tell that return type may same or may different. Because Java introduced a feature called as covariant return type. Covariant return type is only applied in case of that is when the return type is reference of a class. When the return type is void, when the return type is primitive data type, it will not work. It only works when the return type is the reference of a class. Listen my word. So now I just explain what it means. I just write here demo1 dot. See, I I just write here class X. X is a class. X is a class. I just write here that is the find public object get. Get is a method, but what is the return type of the method is? Return type of the method is what? Object. You know that return type never be a class. Return type never be an object. A return type is the reference of object class. You know that. What are the reference hold? Is it hold the data or hold the address? It hold the address. So here get is a method, and what is the return type of the method? Return type of the method is what? A reference of a class. I just write here return anyway. I just write here. There is a Rashmi Sir. I just return here Rashmi Sir. You know that when I write return Rashmi Sir is in double quotes. That means what? It is a string. I return a string object, but that is not returned by string class reference, but it is returned by its the base class. Who is the base class in Java? Object. In my last class I covered. Here the return type is not a string class reference, but the return type is the object class reference. Now I move to the next part. What I can do? I just write here. There is the class y extends x. Now you see y is the child class of which class? X class. See here, I already covered method overriding is only possible in case of what? Inheritance. Without inheritance, method overriding never possible. As y is the child class of x, I want to override the method. Here you see, I just write the public string. That is get. That is the method. Here you tell, is the return type is same or the return type is different? Different. Here, the return type in the base class return type is the object class reference, whereas in the child class the return type is the string class reference. This concept in Java is called as covariant return type. Here you see, I just write here return. That is Java technogram. I just write here that is Java technogram. Here I specify in the base class I return my name. In the child class I return our institute name. So anyway, this is overriding. It's not an error. So simple word, if I use the annotation, yeah, you see this annotation I use, and if it is an error, compiler must generate error, because through annotation I instruct the compiler that the base class method is override in the child. Now I move to that is the next part. See here what I can do. That is public class, that is a demo. Yeah, I just write. Here you see, I just write here public static void main. Here you see what I did here, string AR. This concept is called as what? Covariant return type. Here you see, this concept in Java is called as covariant return type. YAA is equal to, that is new y. Fine. Anyway, I am constructing the y class object. I just write string name is equal to. I just write AA dot get. Now you see system dot out dot you see that is out dot print name. That is I just write here name is I just call. Anyway, I just write here sorry name is I just write that is the class. End of the block, yeah, you see, end of this thing. You check here, I already covered. Here what happens, I'm constructing the child class object by calling the child class construct. Another question I think in the last class, someone asked me that if the base class having no constructor and the child class having no constructor, then what happens? Remember, if in the base class there is no constructor is available and in the child class there is no constructor is available, then compiler automatically recognizes the default constructor. So remember, here I'm calling the child class constructor. There is no constructor available in the child class. So compiler automatically recognize the which constructor default, and the default constructor of the child class call the base class also which constructor default, because in the base class there is no constructor is available. It is called the default constructor. So there are two, that is what doubts you guys asked me in the last class. I clarified all the two doubts. If the base class having no constructor and the child class having no constructor, then compiler call the default constructor without generating any error message. So the child class object is created. Now when I call a.get, as the method name same, parameter same, return type is different because of covariant return type. Compiler unable to bind the method. Yeah, who bind the method? JVM. After I construct the child class object, JVM bind the child class. When it bind the child class method, the get method is called for the child class. If the base class method called, it generate error. Why it generate error? Because the return type of the method is object class reference. But as the child class method is called, the return type is a string class reference, and it not generate any error. It return Java technocrat. So what it print? Name is Java technocrat. This concept in Java is called as covariant return type. Listen, you tell that sir, covariant return type is a powerful feature which is introduced in JDK 1.4. In case of covariant return type, the return type may be same or it may be child class. Third, covariant return type never be implemented in case of, that is in case of when the return type is void or return type is any primitive paradigms. Now you see what actually happens here. I just show you. It is not an error. You check. I just compiled the code. Now you see Java demo 1. So those guys, before you are just attending the class, having the doubt that is the return type is same or it is different, now I'm clarifying you that return type can be different when the return type is the reference of the class, because covariant return type is only applied when the return type is the reference of the class. Here the base class method return type is object class reference, where arch the child class method return type is a child class reference. So that's all about the concept of what method overriding. I just explained what actually method overriding is. Method overriding supports runtime polymorphism. I covered how it supports runtime polymorphism. I explained that what is covariant return type. I also covered. So careful, these are some fundamental concepts I covered, and you guys please listen to it. Now, guys, are you enjoying or not? Please give your comments. If you are enjoying, then fine, I can proceed. Otherwise, today is a Sunday and I want you guys enjoy. So हम लोग क्या करते थे जब संडे में हम पढ़ाई करते थे, तब actually what happens, we are just spending only limited time for our studies, but after that we are just enjoying, because one day must be required for refreshment. आप लोग मार्केट जाओगे, that is also required. So if you are interested to continue, then fine. Otherwise, that is tomorrow I take the class at same time. That is 5 to 6. I take your class. So I think today is a holiday, so I don't want to waste the time. So आप लोग जाओ मार्केट घूमो. But आज मैंने जो टॉपिक पढ़ाया है, आप इसको देख लो. And another thing, please give or share your comments, share the message that we are live to your friends, and subscribe the channel, and inform your student, that is friends, relatives, they can also attend it. Because I'm taking the session for the job, I want that is Odisha and other states also. That is technically sound. Nowadays, my students are in a high level. They always tell that, sir, in Odisha, or other state also, their range of or quality is nowadays decreased. So I want that is as I am the mentor, I never want the students face any problem. So now the communication is there are lots of communication are there. Now this is the big OTT platform where I can share some that is what a knowledge to you. This is a privilege that I get through OTT platform. Thank you. So next class I start from the next dynamic method dispatch. Thank you. That is so आप लोग जाओ. That is enjoy your time. Bye.
এইটা আজ করলেন লাস্ট এটা এন্ড